Good morning. Today is Friday, July 5th, 2024. I share this with you this morning as an important and applicable insight into our Torah portion, the Parsha of Korach. And I also share this as a tribute to my dear friend, Dr. Peter Safran, who this coming week is completing his third term as president of ADATH. And I have tremendous gratitude to Peter for his leadership and what he's done for me. And what I'm going to discuss is an area among many in which Peter excels. Korach says to Moshe at the beginning of our parsha, Rav lochem, Moshe, you have enough. Ki chol ha'eda kulam kadoshim. The whole community is holy. Ubesocham Hashem. And God dwells within every single one of us. Umadua tisnasu al kal Hashem. Why do you, Moshe, have to be the leader on top of everybody? Everybody is holy. Rabbi Jonathan Jacks explains, we know from our sages and from the rest of the narrative that Korach was a demagogue. He was not a true Democrat. He wanted the power for himself, not for the people. And we also know that among the various people who were his followers, each of them had their own separate reasons to be resentful of Moshe. But let's set aside all of that, in quotation marks, petty stuff. Let's set that aside for a moment and just focus on the words that Korach says and ask ourselves, are they true or false? Korach says, Kol ha'eda kulam kadoshim. The entire congregation is holy. Everyone among the Jewish people is holy. Well, surely that's correct. After all, God asked the people, charged the people earlier in the Torah to be a mamlechas kohanim v'goy kadosh, a kingdom of priests and a nation, all of whose citizens are holy. The next thing that Korach says, ubesocham Hashem, and God dwells equally among all of us. Well, that also seems correct. That was the whole point of building the Mishkan. Remember all the weeks that we discussed the Mishkan and all of its details. And remember, it started with God's command, V'asu li migdash, make for me a sanctuary, God says to the Jewish people, V'shachanti b'socham, and I will dwell amongst you, within every person, God is dwelling. Doesn't seem like those two parts of the statement are incorrect. But it's the last phrase that is not only a mistake, but a very serious mistake. Umadua tisnasu al kahal Hashem. And why do you, Moshe, set yourself up above everybody else? Now, this is not a small mistake. This is a fundamental mistake because Moshe represents the birth of a new kind of leadership that had not existed in the world before. And that's what Korach and his followers did not understand. And the truth is, even today, many of us still do not understand this. So it's very important to get it clear. Rabbi Jacks points out the famous buildings in the ancient world, the most famous buildings, the pyramids. The pyramids were more than just buildings and more than just burial places. They were statements of a hierarchical social order. They're wide at the base and they narrow at the top to the point. At the top, at the point, is the king, or Paro, or Caesar, whatever you're going to call that person. It was believed that at that point, at the top, that is the meeting place between heaven and earth. And only the leader, only the king, only the paro stood at that great height. Everyone else was beneath them, the laboring masses of humanity. And it was believed in ancient times that this was not just one way of organizing society, it was the only way. It was believed that the very universe was organized on this principle. The sun ruled the heavens, the lion ruled the animal kingdom, and the king or the paro ruled the nation. That's how it is. That's how it must always be. Some are born to rule, a few are born to rule, and everyone else is born to be ruled. Judaism is a protest against this kind of hierarchy. Every human being, not just the king, but every single human being is created, but B'Tselem Elokim, in God's image. No one is entitled to rule over another without their assent. Now, there is still a need for leadership, because just like an orchestra without a conductor would lapse into discord, just like an army without a general would descend into a mob, just like a nation without a government would lapse into anarchy. So there needs to be leadership. However, here's the critical difference, because in this model, initiated by Judaism, represented by Moshe, in the social order, everyone has equal dignity in the eyes of heaven, and a leader does not stand above the people. A leader serves the people. The great symbolic metaphor, the great visual image of biblical Israel is the menorah. Think about what a menorah looks like. It is an inverted pyramid. It's broad at the top. It's narrow at the base. The greatest leader of Israel is therefore the most humble, the one who is at the bottom, whose role it is to organize and to facilitate and to help the great masses, all of whom share equal dignity in the eyes of God. And that's the reason that the greatest leader must be the most humble. V'ha'ish Moshe anav ma'od. Moshe was exceedingly humble. Mikol ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adama. He was more humble than any other person in the whole world. Why? Because that's what it means to be the leader par excellence. The highest accolade that is given to Moshe in the Torah, and it's repeated several times, is when Moshe is called Eved Hashem, a servant of God. And it's fascinating, leaving Moshe aside for a moment, that the one person who is commanded to be humble, yes, of course, humility is a quality we should all strive for, yes. But the one commandment where it is obligatory for one person to be humble, only one, and that's a king. Says the Torah, when the king takes the throne to his kingdom, he is to write for himself a scroll of law, the Torah scroll, and it has to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life so that he may learn to revere God and follow carefully all the words of this law and these decrees, and not consider himself better than his fellow Israelites. Again, the only person who has this command to be humble and not to consider himself or herself better than anyone else is the king. Listen to what the Rambam says, Maimonides, in describing the proper conduct of a king. Just as the Torah has granted the king great honor and obligated everyone to revere him, so too it has commanded him to be lowly. of heart, as it says, "My heart is a void within me." Nor should he treat Israel with overbearing haughtiness, as it says, "And he should not consider himself better than any of his fellows, than any other person." He should be gracious and merciful to the small and to the great, involving himself in their good and welfare. He should protect the honor of even the humblest of people. That's the commandment for the king. And this applies to all positions of leadership within the Jewish people. Maimonides lists among those who have no share in the world to come, a terrible, terrible punishment, includes a person who imposes a rule of fear on the community, not for the sake of heaven. A person who rules over a community by force for his own glory and personal interests, says the Rambam, Ein lo chelek l'olam haba, he has no share in the world to come. We reject that model of leadership. C.S. Lewis very wisely defined humility as not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. Because here's the truth that Judaism teaches. And this is the distinction between Moshe and Korach. Great leaders respect others. Great leaders honor others, lift others, inspire others to reach heights that they themselves may never have felt able to reach. Rabbi Jacks explains that sometimes the worst mistakes we make are to project our feelings onto someone else, and Korach does exactly that. Korach was an ambitious man. He saw Moshe and Aaron as he saw himself if he was in their position. Ambitious, setting themselves above God's congregation. That's what Korach wanted for himself. He wanted to be the top. He wanted to be the leader so that he was above everyone else. So he imputed to Moshe this motive, which could not be further from the truth. Korach did not understand what Moshe did understand, that the true leadership within Judaism is to serve. This is what Moshe practiced. And we learn this Torah portion every year to remind ourselves and to apply it to ourselves. Those who serve do not lift themselves high. They lift others high. Peter Safran has done just that as president of ADATH. He lifts up others so that ADATH will excel. Peter ends his term as president this coming week with such a magnificent record of accomplishment through serving our incredible community. This is what Korach did not understand. This is the model that Moshe leaves for us. To lead is to serve. To lead is to lift others to their greatest potential. My friends, I wish you a great day and a beautiful Shabbos, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.